Prime Minister, do you really think that if we vote to leave, we risk war, economic damage, permanent damage to our welfare?
Well, let's take each one of those in turn. First of all, I never said that we would face World War III. I just simply said Europe has played a role in bringing the countries of Europe together after a century of two appalling conflicts. And while we should credit NATO, we should also credit the European Union.
But
and
you
I
did
asked
say
the question.
war. You
no,
did say
I
war.
didn't actually. I said, can we really take for granted that the security of our continent is guaranteed? And I don't think we can. So I think that's a perfectly realistic thing to say. As for the economic warnings, they're not just made by me, they're made by the IMF, the OECD, organisations that are paid to advise prime ministers and countries about economic risks. You know, organisations that you regularly have on this programme, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, that are rigorously independent. They are saying that our economy would suffer, that we'd lose jobs, that we'd be less well off, and that has real consequences for people. And I think it's right to warn of these things.
But then why on earth did you risk this? I mean, if you knew that this was the risk to Britain, what on earth were you doing calling a referendum that risked the possibility this might happen?
Well, because I think it's right for the people to decide about how the country is governed and the arrangements under which we live with the European Union and the rest of it. We haven't had a vote since 1975, and I think we've had a lot of European treaties and changes since then, and referendums, frankly, have been promised and not delivered, and I think it was time to say, right, let's put this beyond doubt. Let's have a renegotiation, which I think was delivered successfully. We made some important changes, and now let's ask the people. I'm confident we'll get the right result, which is Britain staying in a reformed European Union. But, you know, the people are sovereign, not the politicians, and it's right to have this discussion and decision.
It's a very nice explanation, but with respect, the people were not crying out for a referendum. The people who were crying out were people in your own party, and basically you were doing this to resolve a spat in your own party, and the victims are the country that might risk falling into the dangers that you've spelt out.
Well, I don't really accept that, actually. All political parties were discussing and having pressures for referendums. The Liberal Democrats committed to one in 2010. We committed to one for this election. The Labour Party have been looking at the case for referendums. It actually was popular in all parties and actually in all parts of the country, even in Scotland, actually. You know, the claim is often made there wasn't consent for a referendum, but actually opinion poll after opinion poll showed that the Scots wanted their say on Europe too.
Let's be candid, both you and Boris could have been outers. You could have been people for leave.
I've actually, in my political life, I've always argued for reform. I've never wanted us to join the Eurozone. I've always wanted Europe to change and for things to get done to make it more flexible. But I've never actually argued for out in my political lifetime. I've never argued for out.
No, but that's all lots of nevers. But you've never actually talked about the promised land in Europe. You don't have a passion for Europe. You've never expressed a passion. And that's, in a sense, why this competition, this campaign is in trouble.
I don't accept that. I'm not a utopian dreamer. I believe in the United Kingdom and in Britain and in our future. But I think we are better off, safer and stronger as part of a European Union. But my arguments, I accept. I'm a practical person. My arguments are mostly practical, about the strength of our economy, about the safety of our people, about the strength of our country. I think there are bits of idealism within me. I think that, you know, when I look at the fact that we sit around this table and talk with each other, and Europe has found a way to avoid conflict, that does make me proud. And
but it also makes you a reluctant European. You're somebody who sort of tolerates it because it's kind of better for us than being out. But that's not somebody who's saying, you know, we could be in the heart of Europe. We could change it. We could bring this. We could bring that. You're always talking about how to opt out of this and that.
Well, actually, I think I do both. When it comes to getting sanctions on Iran, I was absolutely in the vanguard saying Europe should do this. When it came to putting sanctions on Russia because of what had happened in Ukraine, Britain led the way. We led the way on creating the single market, which I think is the greatest single argument for wanting to stay in this organisation. But yeah, if you're saying I'm not an out-and-out Euro enthusiast, no, I'm not, and neither, frankly, is the majority of the British people. We're great enthusiasts for the United Kingdom, but my argument is if you want a strong and great United Kingdom, we're better off in.
That's jolly difficult in the face of Albion and people talking about the old days, the good old days when Britain was great. We want to put the great back into Britain. And all you're saying is, well, I think we'd be a bit better in Europe. It's a bit safer.
I think I'm making a stronger argument than that. As I was saying today, you know, I think, you know, Churchill stood alone in May 1940 and decided to fight on. But he didn't want to be alone. He wanted to be fighting with others in Europe. He was standing up for European democracy and freedom and the rule of law, and I think we should stand up for that again today.
For you, it's do or die, isn't it? Have you got the fire you talked about just a year ago after the election?
I think you've seen from me a very passionate and strong pro-Remain campaign. I've been to every part of the United Kingdom. I've stood on platforms with politicians of different parties. I've made economic arguments. I've made, I think, very strong arguments about Britain's place in the world. I think I've put everything I can into this campaign, and there's another 7 days to go after this one, and you'll see even more.
But going round the country, standing here, standing there, being there, saying this, that isn't enough, is it? The problem is there's a lack of passion in this campaign. There's a passion amongst the business community, but then they get written off as the elite. Isn't that a problem?
I don't accept that. I think there is passion in this campaign because we're arguing about the sort of country we want our children to grow up in. And of course, there's an economic argument. I want my children to have job opportunities, travel opportunities, studying opportunities in a country, in a European Union of 28 countries. But I also want them to grow up in a country inside an organisation like this that can make changes and affect things in the world. We led on climate change in the Paris talks, because we were in the European Union. We led on stopping piracy off the Horn of Africa. We led on getting Ebola out of Sierra Leone.
I know, but
partly
none of
helped by. I've made all those arguments and many more besides.
You have, but
there's no lack of passion. But if you're saying you're not an out-and-out Euro enthusiast, correct. If you're saying your argument is quite practical, correct. But you shouldn't mistake that for a lack of passion and importance about what this issue involves.
But if you look at what the issue now involves, it basically involves immigration and people who have jobs at stake, people who are worried about educational standards, people who are worried about the health service. They're worried about immigration, and you don't connect with them.
Well, I think immigration is a challenge, but I think everybody understands that you don't solve an immigration problem by wrecking your economy, which is what I think we do. But
it's not a challenge to your house, to your job. They feel individually challenged by immigration.
I think it is a challenge for everybody because of the pressure and because of the rate of change. And my argument is, look, there are good ways to control immigration. We need to do more to control it from outside the EU, which is, remember, more than half of the total net migration. And inside the EU, through my negotiations, securing this change so that people, they can come, but if they can't get a job and they can't support themselves, they have to go. And if they do stay, they have to work for 4 years paying in before they get full access to the welfare system. I think that's a change that has huge support in our country. It hasn't come in yet, but if we stay, it will, and it'll make a difference.
Do you think that what Boris Johnson and what Michael Gove have been saying has been true? Have they spoken the truth?
I'm going to focus, as I've said, on the issues and the facts and the figures and the arguments. Some of the claims made by the Leave campaign, I think, are completely untrue. The idea that Turkey's about to join the European Union is not true. For instance, the idea that we, 350 million a week is the cost of our membership, that is not true. And it's been important to nail these things during the campaign, and I think by and large we are doing that.
Can you imagine what that does to people looking in and wondering about their future government in this country? After all, technically, you've got 4 years to run. The idea that you're going to be working together with people that have accused you of lying, told lies according to you, spoken untruths, people who can't be trusted. Some of your very own ministers have said you can't be trusted.
Well, it's a passionate campaign, and that is inevitable when you've got such an enormous issue and such deep differences of opinion about whether Britain is better off remaining or Britain's better off cutting itself off.
But you're not going to
Europe.
Pretend that in the future suddenly all these things will be buried. Once you've had a referendum, it'll all be over, and we'll all be friends and toiling together in the interests of Britain.
That
it doesn't stack up.
Well, I don't agree with that. We all supported a referendum. We'll accept the judgment of the British people, and we'll have to come back together again afterwards. And there's a huge government programme of life chances, reforming prisons, reforming schools, investing in childcare, creating a 7-day NHS. There's huge challenges to overcome. And I think you'll be surprised how politicians can have an argument, have that decided, and then get on with the other things about which they, by and large, agree.
Can I just ask you then about election expenses, which is something that we've worked out very extensively. Why have you been prepared to spend money on a QC to try and stop police investigating what we have revealed?
Well, we haven't been doing that. What we're doing is we are cooperating with the...
You had a QC in the Thanet South constituency in the court actually asking the judge to stop the investigation.
Well, there's a year-long process of investigating these things.
But you didn't want that year. You went to court to ask the court not to allow the police an extension to go on investigating these abuses.
That's right. As I said, there had been a year, and it's perfectly legitimate to argue, well, that's enough time to look at it. But look, I'm very happy for the Electoral Commission to examine all of this.
Well, why get a QC to stop it then?
Well, that was in one particular seat. But I'm very happy that they've got the time now and they've got all the paperwork to examine this. But I do
Well,
think...
they have got the paperwork, but Prime Minister, with respect, the Electoral Commission had to go to court to wring the papers out of you.
They didn't have to go to court.
They did.
They didn't.
They did.
That's not
you,
right.
you were 3 days overdue and they had to go to court.
We had told them when the papers were going to be delivered. And so in our view, that was unnecessary.
That is not their view.
Well, that is not my view. But anyway, look, there's no point in having a spat about this now.
No, but it doesn't sound as if you take this seriously.
I take
there
it very
are 31
seriously.
seats in which it appears that you underdeclared, and in some cases by tens of thousands of pounds, hotel costs, which were never figured in the local inventory.
But we disagree with your approach to this because we say it's quite simple, actually. You've got a national bus tour, which all parties have had over the years, and that was declared. And then there are expenses, and that's a national expense, and everyone have had national bus tours. And then there are expenses associated with that national bus tour that needed to be declared and will be declared, and we told the Electoral Commission about that, and that will still make us under the national cap. So look, I think it's very important all these things are investigated. I'm very happy for us to answer all the questions about it. I don't think there are any questions that anyone's asking that we can't answer.
No, but let me just put you what the judge says.
The
judge said the Channel 4 News allegations indicate the potential for offences committed in a significant number of constituencies on an unprecedented scale. I mean, this is a scandal of very large proportions.
Well, I don't agree with that because, as I say, all parties have had these national bus tours, which I think by definition are national, and all parties have costs associated with those national bus tours, which again I would say by definition are national, and those should be part of the national declaration.
Well, given that these could lead to by-elections, will you as Prime Minister move this thing speedily through so that it can be resolved as quickly as possible? Because at the moment, your own majority, if any of this is proved, is in serious danger.
Well, what we're doing is answering the questions of the Electoral Commission. As I say, I think, look, it's a Channel 4 investigation, and I know you're proud of the work that you've done. We're very happy. We're answering all the questions. I think you're making quite a large mountain out of what I think is a relatively
So you disagree with the judge, then?
No. I think it's a relatively straightforward set of questions that we have to answer. I'm very confident we're going to answer all of them and put this issue comfortably away. Because at the end of the day, as far as I can see, as I say, all parties had national bus tours. That's a national expense. All parties have associated expenses with those national bus tours. And I'm very confident that the party chairman and all the investigations will be able to answer all these questions. I really, I'm taking it seriously because it's a serious issue, but I'm confident that there's nothing untoward here.
Final word on the referendum. Are you going to win?
I very much hope so. I believe so. I think we have the strongest arguments, and I think the more that people consider the future of our economy, the jobs, the livelihoods, the advantages we get out of being part of a single market of 500 million people, that we're better off if we stay in, the more people consider that argument and the risks of leaving. And to anyone who hasn't made up their mind, I would say when you think of the opportunities we want for our children, the place in the world we want for our country, the risks there are to that economy, if you're not decided, don't risk it.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.